Welcome to the June 2024 edition of City Connection. This live TV program, brought to you by the Grand Rapids Community Media Center, offers the community the chance to hear from and ask questions directly to your local city officials. I'm your host, Allison Donahue. Filling in for Mayor Bliss this month is 2nd Ward Commissioner Lisa Knight. Joining the commissioner later on in this episode will be Allison Sutter, Sustainability and Performance Management Officer in the Office of Sustainability. And in the second half of the show, we provide time with Commissioner Knight and our guests to take some of your questions and comments. To take part in this live conversation, you can send your questions to cityconnection@grcmc.org. City Connection, a collaboration between the CMC, GRTV, the City of Grand Rapids, and the Rapidian, is live today, June 10, 2024, on Community Access TV Channel 24. Welcome, Commissioner Knight, to City Connection.
Thank you for having me.
Always happy to have you on here. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fabulous.
Great.
It's a beautiful day.
Yeah, started the summer just about.
Yeah.
A few more weeks.
Absolutely.
Which we have a lot of summer-related topics today. Parks, pools opening, curfews for the youngins. So
Yeah.
we can jump right into a few of those. I know right now the city is looking to name a new park space. Do you have any details on that, how they're looking for folks to suggest names and where this park is going to be?
What's actually funny is I do not. I'm pretty sure that the Grand Rapids Parks and Recreation, though, is putting out the information on naming the park and how people can be a part of it. And actually, it's really exciting, that the city is pulling people in to be a part of this. So that happened when they did, I believe, Roberto Clemente Park. They changed that over. And so being able to, actually, I'm having a blank right now because I do know where that park is. Being able to add more green space to our community, which our community loves it. It just feels good, it looks good, especially going into the summer, and then adding to our tree canopy throughout the city of Grand Rapids, I think is really important. So if people want more information, have them go over to the city's website, and I'm sure everything they need is there, and if not, email me.
Yeah, I know that you can find details in the news section on the city's website. So
Which is really cool.
if you're interested in finding out how to take part in that,
Yeah.
you can go there for that one. Other things though, youth curfews. I don't know that everyone knows that young folks have a curfew in Grand Rapids that is set by the city of Grand Rapids.
Yeah, and that's been there for a long time. I think we readdressed it after some incidents in our community happened about a month ago. And I think it's really important that we understand that again, it's summertime. Schools got out on Thursday, maybe a few before. And then, so really being able to provide opportunities for our young people to do things so that they're not sitting around trying to find things to do and end up pulled in the wrong direction. But also for their safety, right? At a certain age, I remember when I was younger, the term was if the street lights were on, you were in the house, right? But it was a different type of community then, right? And so we really want our young people to be safe. We've had a number of incidents that have happened now over the last couple of weeks. And it's really important that people have that information. I know the city posted that information out. They put it on their Facebook page, on the city page. A lot of us local officials have taken that and put it on our Facebook pages as well, pushed it out through our newsletter. I mean, I immediately took the information and put it in my newsletter and sent it out. But there are a number of people who don't connect with my newsletter or don't connect with the city's website or their Facebook pages. So if we can find other avenues to really get this information into the community so that they know, and I don't know if that's flyers, I don't know if that's door hangers, I don't know if that's connecting with businesses that may be located in some of these spaces. To really help them. I know that Cure Violence with the Urban League of West Michigan is really active out in the community and connecting with young people and families in that urban core district in 49507. So I know that they've been helping get some information out, but we really need all hands on deck for this.
I will say I know a public access TV show where we can share that information.
What?
So I'll take the opportunity now.
Thank
Youth
you.
curfew, so children under 12 need to be in their homes by 10, under 15 they need to be home by 11, and children under 17-year-olds need to be home by midnight.
Yes,
So we're inside by midnight, not on the
absolutely.
streets.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I know once summer hits, we all get a little bit of a night owl in us, and kids
Absolutely.
especially. So.
Well, and it's, you know, a lot of things happen under the cloak of darkness, right? But if we can get enough things to engage them during the day, hopefully that rest time can come. I know it's, you know, there's a lot of things that play into that, right? Families are working harder than they ever have. And some families have to work 2, 3 jobs just to take care of their families. And so there may not be someone at home. They may not be the grandmother or the mother or the aunt that can care for these young people. And so, you know, when the terminology, it takes a village, it's going to take a number of villages. And we all need to step up.
Is there like a penalty if kids do get caught out past those hours?
I'm not going to say that the police are just looking to pick up people, right? But there may be some contact just to get them to a safe space, right? So if they're out and there's things going on and they end up engaged in whatever that situation might be, the first step is that they're going to try their best to mitigate the issue going any further and connect with the parents so that that child can get where they need to be safely.
Shifting gears a little bit, we've been talking throughout the year about the National Community Survey, and the results of this year's survey just were posted. Before we get into the findings, can you tell our audience about what this survey is and why it matters?
So this survey, I believe this was the 3rd one that they've done throughout the city. I had to look where else and make sure I was correct on that. And it's really to gauge from our community where we are at, right? So how the community feels about the things that are happening locally and how it's impacting their lives, how it's impacting our city, our economy, community engagement, our unhoused population, our education, early childhood education, housing, all of those things that we deal with in the city, right? And a lot of people, I think, have a mindset, I think we may have talked about this before, that, you know, you have this local city government structure and their responsibility is to handle everything. And that's really not how it works. There are different entities that are engaged in different spaces, and what the city tries to do is work with and partner with the community to try to meet these needs, right? But you can sit back and think that you know how everything is working and not hear from the people that's actually being impacted by it. And so it's important to put this information out so that our community can speak to what they see, and then we can look at those things and think about how can we best address those. And again, some of those things that are in there, we have no control over at all, but there may be opportunities for us to work with and or partner with agencies or organizations to help some of those situations.
Yeah, or there might be things that were brought up that you might not have even thought about on the city commission yet, but the neighbors and community members are feeling and seeing.
Absolutely.
Looking at it from what came out of the results of this survey, just looking at the highest performing areas from what community members say, they're saying the local economy, cultural opportunities, and community inclusivity are increasing and improving over these years. There's one that I personally found surprising is that Grand Rapids ratings held steady for affordable housing, affordable quality food, and residents' personal economic outlook. The reason that I find that surprising is because we hear so often about affordable housing in Grand Rapids and that we're kind of in a housing crisis here. So the results of these surveys, is it more about how folks are feeling and like testing the temperature of folks and less about maybe the actual numbers or reality? Or
we could man, we could probably spend half of our time or all of our time really breaking this down. First of all, you got to look at the number of people who were polled, and then the number of responses of people who were polled. And then that information is then disaggregated against cities that are similar size to ours, a similar demographic and breakdown of ours. And so it may say that, yeah, a number of people are think more positively about our housing, but it's how many of those people out of those that have been polled, right? So if you have a pool of, let's just throw out a number of 6,000 people that have been polled, well, if I get 1,000 responses, who are those people that are responding? Where do those people live? What is the age demographic breakdown, right? It's all of these things. So what has come out right now still has another layer to go down, and they're working on that now to disaggregate some of that information, because we saw the same thing, and so we all had questions about that, right? And so it's not totally, I don't want to say it's totally completed, because there's more information that's going to come out from that. And to speak to those very same things, right? Who were the people that were engaged in this? What area of the city did they live in? You know, what was the income base on those people? Because everybody's lived experience is very different. And so where you live and how you're conditioned speaks to what you see. Right? So we may be looking at the same thing, but we're not necessarily seeing the same thing. And you've probably seen that in a lot of DEI trainings where they have the big elephant and they blindfold people and everybody's touching it and they're calling it something different than what it is, but it's still that thing, right? So I think we always have work to do to get better. This is just a small sample of information. It is not all of the information that we could have gotten. And so then, I step back and say, how could we have reached more people to get more information that will feed into this? But because I would dare say that there are other people in our community that may have viewed some of those questions a little bit differently.
Yeah, and this isn't the only opportunity that the city has put out there for community engagement and hearing feedback. I know that, I believe the city's still looking for feedback for the community master plan.
Absolutely.
Which is, I would say, even a more localized approach at like the issues and things that are going on in our city. This is a national survey, so like you mentioned earlier, it's comparing us to other cities, but no one knows Grand Rapids like Grand Rapidians, and we have our own unique culture here.
Well, even in that, and I know the city has been trying to do a number of things to try to reach out to community members, but we're always missing people. We just are. And then you have neighborhood associations that may be doing area-specific plans for like the neighborhoods that they're in. So they may have an even deeper reach, but sometimes it's really helping people to understand why your voice actually matters in this. And it's hard to do that when your voice has not been counted all the time. And so why should I use my voice, right? Why is it important for me to be a part of this? And again, it's a lot. Like when people do these, I went to Creston Neighborhoods area specific plan, and they had dinner for everybody. And it was funny because myself and Commissioner Sassy showed up, and we saw that they were running out of food, so we ran across the street and ordered more pizza. Why? Because families were coming during dinner time. Right? And they had their children with them. So we want people to be able to feel comfortable about being in the space and sharing their information and not having to worry about anything else. Right? So if we can mitigate some of those situations, then it's easier. But I think even thinking broadly, bringing in churches into that conversation and other smaller organizations that are located within the communities that have a certain type of reach and can help actually get some of the information that we're looking to get, because they're still a part of the community, right? We're not separate, we're still part of the community.
But there is that trust built in there when you have those little micro communities that maybe the city hasn't built yet with those communities. So we are just about time now for our first break. Thank you so much for answering those questions.
Absolutely.
And hopefully we'll get to a few more later. But when we come back, I will be talking with the city's Sustainability and Performance Management Officer. Stay tuned.
For over 30 years after humble beginnings as a public access TV station, the Community Media Center has grown to be an active, multi-platform media and technology assistance organization, encouraging and enabling our community to push their creative boundaries. We power a variety of resources, including a music-centered community radio station, WYCE, a community venue with stage and screen at Wealthy Theater, citizen-driven journalism with the Rapidian, a web development team empowering local nonprofits, an education department that trains and broadens students' minds, and a free speech public access television studio, GRTV, where it all began. By introducing audiences to new voices and ideas, we enhance community engagement and create connections between artists and audiences, enriching our city's cultural offerings. We empower and collaborate with platforms and resources accessible to all and used by all. Every free democratic society depends on media, accessible to the community and uncensored by government. The Community Media Center continues this work for the media landscape of today and tomorrow. These platforms and services empower our neighbors to tell their stories and explore the richness of culture that Grand Rapids has to offer. Connect, discover, learn, create, and share. The Grand Rapids Community Media Center.
Welcome back to City Connection. If you're just now tuning in, I'm Allison Donahue, and in this segment, we get the chance to talk with Allison Sutter, the city's Sustainability and Performance Management Officer. That is such a tongue twister of a title. Allison, thank you so much for coming on City Connection today. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me here today.
Absolutely. I do want to make one note before we jump into this one. We were talking about the National Community Survey in our last segment. I want to note that the city is planning to present these results with a workshop and engagement session at the July 30 Commissioner Night Out. So if you're interested in learning more about those survey results and what the city plans to do with them, that's a great opportunity. It's going to be at Gerald R. Ford Academic Center. And then the full results are also available on the city's website. Just wanted to put that out there. But thank you so much for being here. I think to get started, for those who aren't familiar with you or your role or even your department, a lot of folks aren't totally aware of everything the city does and what it encompasses. Can you give us a quick rundown on the Office of Sustainability?
Yes. Well, I've been with the city for just about 7 years now. However, the city has been really focused on sustainability. It really got started in 2005 when former Mayor Hartwell was elected. So it did start with a mayor at the time, and Mayor Bliss was a commissioner at the time. So she has been a part of kind of the journey of sustainability at the city of Grand Rapids. And so we've been doing a lot of work since that time. There is an Office of Sustainability. It is housed within the Executive Office of the City Manager. And we currently have 3 team members in addition to myself, and have the opportunity to both look at our own municipal operations. So how are we operating our water utilities, our street lighting, our parks and recreation department. So we do a lot of that work, kind of internal facing, but we also have the opportunity and have been doing a lot of work with the community. And as Commissioner Knight was talking about, and climate change and sustainability is no different in terms of our entire community needs to be taking action and doing different things. And the city only has so much that we can do in that space. We've been doing a lot of work to partner with many agencies and individuals throughout the community to work on climate change.
And then what is your role specifically?
So my role is, when I was hired in, it was to manage sustainability and climate change. When City Manager Washington was hired, he had a vision of wanting to have the city's first more formalized strategic plan written. And so I was asked to help manage the creation of a citywide strategic plan. So that's not specific to sustainability. That's where that performance management title comes in. And it's very unique. Not a lot of people do both of those offices, performance management and strategy and sustainability. But it provided a lot of opportunity because as a city we are so committed to sustainability. Then I had the opportunity to continue to weave that through our citywide strategic plan and a lot of the work that we're doing. So 2019, the city, we published our first kind of formal strategic plan, which is the kind of plan for operations for the city. It's not a policy document. It is a city manager, city administration plan to kind of run and drive where we're focused. And so at that time, after we did the plan, they said, why don't you start an office of performance management and help ensure that we're implementing the strategic plan that we just wrote. And so I had two roles that I was playing and had the opportunity to work with departments to ensure that we were staying accountable to what we committed to in that plan.
And now your department's going to have a bit of a change.
Yes.
Starting next month, you're stepping down at the end of the month.
Yes.
I'm sure that's a bittersweet change for you.
Yes, it is. It is. I was mentioning, I love my job. I think the city of Grand Rapids is doing a phenomenal job on sustainability and climate change work. We're national leaders in many respects for the work that we get to do, and I have a couple young ones at home, and this is a time in my life where there are some needs at home that I'm going to be investing more of my time there. But I couldn't be more excited about my colleague Annabelle Wilkinson's opportunity. She'll be stepping in to help lead the office in partnership with other team members, and Assistant City Manager Matthews oversees the office, and he is working with HR to do some recruiting, and they'll be replacing my position. But just phenomenal teamwork from all across the city organization in terms of embedding sustainability in operations, whether it's the water department, environmental services, parks and recs, facilities. We've had great partnerships, and there's a lot of people who do this work, and I'm super excited to see where it will go from here.
And your role will still be that kind of dual role?
Well, I think they're going to evaluate it a little bit. This particular position will be focused solely on sustainability. However, the city and City Manager Washington's very committed to the strategic plan, and they'll continue to kind of have a point person to help with that.
Great, great. Well, let's get into talking about some of the work that you've done while you've been in this role. I think now would be a good time to reflect on your tenure in this position and what some of your favorite accomplishments have been over the last 7 years, I think you said?
It is, yes.
Yeah.
It goes by fast, but
Yeah.
it's been a fun, fast ride. There are a lot of things that I could talk about. I do think on that performance management side, we already talked about the strategic plan. But in that, we worked together with our commissioners at the time in 2019. It was just before Commissioner Knight's tenure, but to actually determine what the values were going to be for the city of Grand Rapids. And I am very proud that sustainability is one of our 6 values, as well as the other ones that we really focus on are equity and collaboration. And so what we mean by that is we really think about, as we're making decisions, whether they're small decisions or big decisions, right? How does that decision not only affect our finances, can we afford it, will it save us money? We think about, how does this affect our people, right? Our people within the city of Grand Rapids who work there, and we think about those in our community that the decision might impact. And then we also think about the impacts of that decision on the environment and on climate change. And so over these 7 years, we have really transitioned more from focusing really on, I would call it conservation, which has been where a lot of cities have focused over time, more into what I would call climate change and environmental justice. Really weaving together equity and sustainability and ensuring that we are being mindful of those that are most impacted by climate change, which are our Black, Indigenous, and people of color in our community, as well as our low-income community members. And so our office has done a lot of work to really try to transition and lead with that and environmental justice components. And one thing that I would say that I tell people I think is one of the projects I'm the most proud of, the city helped catalyze and create, it's a mouthful, but we call it the Community Collaboration on Climate Change. So it's C4 for short. And it is not run by the city, it's not managed by the city. We helped create it because we knew our community needed a grassroots-led effort with respect to environmental justice and climate justice, and wanted to be able to help support the creation of that group that could serve as a partner with the city. So we can say, here are some things we're thinking, but I don't want to just sit in City Hall on my own and create a climate plan without having those partners in the community that can help us understand, particularly, again, those that are most vulnerable in our Black and brown residents with respect to climate change. They typically are hit first and hit worst. And we need to understand and be informed as to what does that mean so that we can be implementing, policies and programs and planning, emergency management, and being thoughtful about that in terms of our responses. So being able to kickstart that, we kind of started in 2017, but it really got launched from the community perspective in 2019, right before COVID. But we made it through there and have continued, and it's a flourishing organization now in their own right that's working on getting a 501c3 designation.
Great. Yeah, so who does manage C4 then, if not the city?
So it's a group of volunteers. We do have some stipends for our BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, and people of color who serve on the leadership team. So I have served as well as Annabelle Wilkinson from the city. But we have a lot of different representatives from nonprofit organizations like WEMIAC, U.S. Green Building Council. We've had partnerships with NAACP, the Urban Core Collective, individuals like Signe Gant Jordan. So it really was a voluntary effort that was created. We got some grant funding from the Wege Foundation and some other funders to really help sustain that. And then we were able to hire an independent contractor to serve as the project coordinator, so Ned Andre. So they're really moving to kind of mature into that more formal organization where they'll hopefully be able to continue having some success getting grants and bringing on more staff and kind of growing into a more mature and established nonprofit at that time.
Great. So the department's been working on quite a few projects over the years. One of them is the Climate Action and Adaptation Plan. Can you tell us about that?
Yes. So in the environmental field and climate change field, we have a lot of acronyms. So apologies for that. We call it the CAP, which is Climate Action and Adaptation Plan. It is a community-wide plan, so it's not just about, again, what city operations are, because this goes to what do we collectively need to do as a community. And so the intention is for it to be a guiding document to help us understand two things. One, how do we reduce the amount of greenhouse gas, also called carbon emissions, that we are emitting in our community? And then how are we prepared for the climate changes that science has already identified will happen in Grand Rapids? And so we've done some analysis and we understand buildings create a lot of emissions. So all the buildings we're in, our own homes, businesses, churches, universities, as well as transportation. And then the second part is, with those changes coming, how do we adapt? And that's the adaptation part and what we're working on and how we can be better prepared and help those most vulnerable in those situations.
Great. Well, it looks like it's already time for our second break. Hopefully we'll have more time to get back to some of these other questions a little bit down the road in the next segments or two. But now it's time for a break. So when we come back, we will be taking questions from viewers like you. that same acronym.
Which the commission just approved our contract to go out and purchase.
I have one color, but it's already chipping. Welcome back to City Connection. If you're just now tuning in, I'm Allison Donahue, and in this segment, Commissioner Lisa Knight and the city's Sustainability and Performance Management Officer, Allison Sutter, sorry about that. I stuttered over your name and called you Stutter. We'll be taking questions and submissions from viewers like you. There's still time to take part in the conversation. Just send in your questions to cityconnection@grcmc.org. Looks like we have some questions already coming in. This first one looks like it's for Commissioner Knight from Paula. Actually, we can hold this one off until the next segment since we only have Allison here for this one. I know that we talked about 100% renewable energy, and I think we have a question coming up that has something to do with that. Could you tell us about what that 100% renewable energy by 2025 goal is? Oh, here's the question. It's from Hannah. Hannah asks, how achievable is the goal of 100% renewable energy? Do we have total control of that with just the local resources?
Yeah. Well, so this goal, just to be very clear, is about municipal operations. So it's our water utilities, street lighting, our own buildings, and our own fleet vehicles. So it is an achievable goal. We use, I mean, it's hard if you're not in the energy space, but just to put in perspective, about 40 million kilowatt hours per year. So we have to be able to ensure that all of that's being supplied by renewables. And for calendar year 2023, last year, we were at 48%. And so the best ways that you can achieve this goal in terms of getting renewables would be building your own solar, so that you have it on site. We don't have the opportunity to really do wind in the city of Grand Rapids, so installing as much solar as we can. And then an alternative path is purchasing renewable energy credits, or RECs. And so it was super exciting because 2 years ago at our water filtration plant, which is located on the lake shore, we put in about 1 megawatt, which is pretty large. It's 3 acres of solar that we put in out there, and it is generating electricity that's being used directly by our water utility. And then just recently, our commission approved a contract where we will be purchasing some renewable energy credits. That's where you work with a vendor who goes out and they build renewable energy. It could be wind or solar, and they will build it, and we get to take credit for the amount that we have purchased. And so it's kind of a one-for-one. It doesn't directly come in to our facilities, but we know how much electricity we're consuming, and we help to invest in building enough renewable energies that it equals the amount of electricity that we are using. And so we've done our best to estimate, and we will be investing a little over $200,000 to purchase those credits over 2 years. And so you won't make any claims until probably January, February of next year, when we can compare exactly what we used in electricity to what we've purchased. But we have modeled it out and done our estimates and believe that at that time we'll be able to state that we have achieved 100% renewable energy. And that will put us as, I believe, the first city in Michigan to do that, and one of the only cities in the country to do that.
So even if that energy that's being produced, say, by a windmill is helping out a township near Traverse City, but because we purchased that credit, it would still reflect
it's kind
back
of like
here.
a paper transaction.
Yeah.
It is hard if you're not in the industry, so it could be built anywhere, although we put a preference and wanted to invest in things that are being built in Michigan to drive our Michigan economy. But the wind or the solar can be built anywhere, and it just helps offset then what is being generated from utilities or other places in terms of also showing that that's renewable and what you're consuming for our own electricity uses are being generated from renewables.
And the city has invested in EV vehicles, correct? Electric
Yes.
vehicles for their.
So twofold, yes, we have some. So our fleet, I think we have about 800 vehicles as a city that we operate, all the way from fire trucks, police cars, street sweepers to sedans for people who go around and read water meters and things. So we have made a commitment, and we are working to try to transition those over to electric vehicles. We got some grant funding and got our first electric street sweeper, for instance. And then we also are trying to invest in the EV charging infrastructure as well, which those often are available to the public too, and not just our fleet.
I didn't know they made EV fire trucks. So
They do. They are at least 2 to 3 times more expensive
Yes.
than your conventional fire truck. So there are not a lot of them in the United States, but they do exist.
Okay, good to know.
We had one here in Grand Rapids, and our fire department got to check it out and see what it was all about. So
Cool. We have another question. It's from Georgia. Georgia asks, what is the budget of the Office for Sustainability? Is it funded through sustainability grants or just tax dollars?
So ballpark in total, it's a little shy of $500,000 per year, and that predominantly funds staff, which is not atypical for some different city departments. It'd be different, again, for water utilities or others where we would have large equipment or operations, but it really is for the staff that we have employed. And we have been very fortunate that we have received a number of grants to support that. And so one of our staff members is a grant-funded, fully staff position. And we're very excited because we actually just recently were notified from the Wegge Foundation that we will be getting more grant funding that will allow us to bring on 2 additional staff members to the team as well. And there's a small part that is what would be considered operational as well, and that is paid for out of the general operating fund, which are general tax dollars that are used to support some city projects and city staff.
Another question for you is from Ronan. Ronan says, you said we lead the nation in a lot of areas. What are those areas? I think that's a reference to a conversation we were having earlier.
Yeah.
But yeah, tell us how we lead in sustainability in Grand Rapids.
So there could be a lot that I will say, but I'll try to just highlight a few different items in different areas. But our biodigester at our water resource recovery facility is cutting edge, one of the only biodigesters where we take wastewater discharge, we turn it into renewable natural gas that we actually then use to fuel the rapid buses or some city fleets. There are not almost any other municipalities that I know of that are doing that. I think in terms of stormwater and our programs that we have there, right, when it rains and we have heavy rain and where does all of that go? We were one of the first cities to separate out. Historically, cities were built where sewers and stormwaters combined together. And if you had a really heavy rainfall, you would actually have untreated sewage would go into your waterways. Well, we spent, it was about $450 million to separate those and are one of the only cities to do that, protecting our Grand River, protecting the health of people in our community so that that untreated sewage is not going into the river. We talked a little bit about renewable energy and being one of the first in that space. And then did also just want to call out with respect to some of the environmental justice work. We've had a number of other communities and some of the work that we have been leading, right, and really trying to be very focused on understanding what is it that our vulnerable communities are experiencing and how can that drive our work. We've had a lot of other cities across the United States look at us and say, what are you doing? How have you figured that out? Like, help us understand that partnership with the C4. How'd you get that started? Or some of the work that we're doing around housing, we're investing $250,000 of grant funding to help low-income residents in Grand Rapids fix their roof, put in some insulation, right? Help make their homes tighter, but also address some of the health concerns and financial burdens that they might have in those houses. So I think there are a lot of others that I could, but a little bit of a speckling of some different examples that we have.
I'm sure because sustainability and environmental health and well-being is relatively new in terms of public policy and local government, I'm sure it's got to be pretty innovative all the time, like figuring out how to make this work. Who do you refer to or talk to drive that innovation in this space?
Yeah, so that's actually innovation is one of our values at the city as well, and I'm grateful that the city has invested in bringing on some additional resources, and I have a colleague, Jennifer Van Horsen, who's in that space, so she understands the innovation side, and we're wrapping that in with climate change. But I would say, you know, there are some national leaders, and we are lucky to have relationships with those national leaders through some kind of organizations that bring together those that are leading. We were asked to participate on a White House Council looking at some of this work where they were looking at identifying some cities that have come in and want to lead in this space. And so I think that those are some of the ways. You know, I have my colleague in Pierre in Ann Arbor. We collaborate a lot and talk about things specific with the state of Michigan and how do we keep kind of working together in this space to think creatively.
Great. And another question leads into that environmental justice piece. It's from Will. Will wants to know, what is environmental justice? What does that mean? What does that look like in practice?
And that's a great question. That, you know, a good reminder to be a little bit clear about that at first. So there were some studies that were done that essentially looked at census tracts across the state of Michigan. It was done by University of Michigan students of where our highest percentage of people of color live. And then there was an overlay, GIS overlay, looking at 11 different environmental factors. Things like, are you located close to a brownfield? What is the air quality in your community? Do you have a lot of industrial permits that are allowed to emit certain amounts of pollutants into the air located close to those communities? How much access to green space, like healthy, accessible, safe green space do you have? And so when they layered kind of those 11 environmental attributes on top of that, and another one around the air quality is really high traffic corridors. You get a lot of fumes coming from, you know, your interstates and other areas. When you layer those two things together, across the United States, and Michigan is no exception, the areas that have the highest concentrations of environmental pollutants are the areas where our Black and brown residents most live. And that's the environmental justice component. It's looking at the environmental pollutants, and it's looking at the injustice of the fact that because of a lot of historical things that have happened, right, but that those pollutants are most impacting people of color in our communities. And so as we think about that, how are we driving decisions to address that first to really start to help, you know, bring back and pull back all of those different pollutants that are affecting the same people in the same area.
You mentioned air quality, and I want to bring it back to that national community survey earlier. One of the results from it is that residents said they feel like air quality has decreased over time. Do you think there's accuracy to that? And what should residents know to stay healthy if air quality is not great in the area that they live?
Good question. Go ahead.
So, I mean, not to take, but again, you have to think about this national survey, or this survey that was just taken, was over the last year, right? And so we're just coming out of a pandemic where a lot of people's health changed dramatically, right? You had long COVID, you have lung issues, you have a whole lot of things that have emerged in people's lives, right? And so the things that they're dealing with around them now are impacting them differently. Their ability to breathe. I was sharing the story about my nephew who just found out he had this severe type of asthma, right? That almost took him out a week ago, and he's under 40. Right? And so really thinking about what's going on in our communities where people's health has actually changed, right? The standard of their health and their access to health care and having that insurance, and people shifted jobs. So they got out of jobs and they started working from home, or they started their own businesses and they don't have insurance to pay for that health care. So to be able to go to the doctor and see what things are going on and be able to get the treatments that they need to take care of themselves. So there's so many different things that play into that. Has our air quality changed? That has changed over the last couple of years, right? And we've seen that happening. So as things continue to shift, it's so many different factors that play into that, that we really have to start taking in, again, as Allison said, looking at that bigger picture, and who is it impacting and how is it impacting things. And I know we've done a lot even recently with addressing the truck routes in certain areas, and knowing that there were a lot of semi trucks that were coming through areas that have been identified in this space. And so how can we help work with the courts and with the police to regulate that? So the police department, I believe, got new weights or scales that they purchased to weigh these trucks that are coming through these areas to make sure that they're not overweight, so they're not destroying the streets, and then they're not putting that extra pollution into the air that kids have to deal with and families have to deal with. So it's all of these different pieces, but I think we're being able to address them, and her office has been really great at doing a lot of this work. So we're grateful for that.
Yeah.
Oh, just one quick shout out, Just Air of Grand Rapids is a great organization. They've come in and got funding to put in some air sensors, and residents can actually sign up and get alerts based on individual sensors in different areas if there are peaks in some. And the last thing I would say, I think it's really hard with the Canadian wildfires. That has had an impact on air quality pretty significantly as well here in the most recent future. So I think that's been on some people's minds as well.
If the air quality is bad, would you recommend that residents mask if it's a really bad air quality day?
Well, I will say the general masks that we have used throughout COVID, I don't know that those are really going to help. It's what's called particulate matter. It's really little dust particles. By and large, those that are asthmatic, which I am, so I follow this very closely, or those that have respiratory diseases, I would say follow the Just Air or the EPA. They have air alerts that'll let you know today is a bad air quality day. You'll hear it's an orange alert day. That really means stay inside. Don't go outside and exercise or do heavy exertion work. So those things are really important for people who have respiratory conditions. Kind of average people who might not suffer from those things, it would be okay, and I don't think that you need to wear anything. I think the extreme is like when it was the thickest from the Canadian wildfires where you can see it. In those instances, everybody should kind of be limiting to a certain degree because you will just feel it and it will impact your breathing and your airways at that time.
Great. Well, we are just out of time for this segment. I want to thank you so much for coming on City Connection, and it's your last month working for the city, so thank you so much for all the work that you've done with making our city a little bit greener.
Thank you, Allison. I appreciate it. Thank you, Commissioner Knight.
Thank you.
We're about to head into another break, but when we return, we'll be taking more questions from the community. Stay tuned.
It's morning in Grand Rapids. Do you know what's going on in your city? Stay informed about what's happening in your community with The Rapidian, your source for hyperlocal news and information. The Rapidian is a community-focused news source powered by local residents like you. Our volunteer writers and reporters create content that hits close to home about topics like local government, business, schools, events, and people. The Rapidian goes beyond the headlines to provide in-depth coverage of issues that affect Grand Rapids directly, so you can stay in the know. We aim to uplift the community by sharing positive, inspiring stories of growth, progress, and neighborhood pride. The Rapidian is your neighborhood newspaper for the digital age. Follow us on our website and social media to stay connected to your community. This is The Rapidian.
City Connection is Commissioner Lisa Knight, and we have more questions from viewers like you. Let's get back into it. This first question comes from Paula. Paula says, "It seems crazy to me that we're adding a park when we need housing. Can you help me understand the city's thinking on this?"
So a lot of times there are areas in our city or pieces of land that you cannot build on. You cannot put a structure on that particular piece of land. And, you know, the EPA has a lot to do with how you change certain areas and certain properties. So I do believe that this space is one that is unbuildable, but it's able to keep that piece of green space for our community to be able to use. And we do need more housing, and we are working. There's a couple of new developments that are happening in our community. We're constantly working with our community partners to figure out different strategies and how to create opportunities for more development to come in and create the housing that we need for our residents who need that.
Yeah, and I've seen some things about like turning commercial buildings
Absolutely.
into residential housing. So that
Absolutely.
might be a way that we don't have to build.
We
on
actually
land.
just approved one that CWD is doing downtown in the old bank building, and they're doing apartments in that space and condos. So that's going to be really cool to see and to be able to have more opportunities for people to find the housing that they need.
Great. Landon asks, "What happens if a child is out after curfew? Are they fined, arrested? Do they get a warning?" We touched on this one a little bit earlier.
Yeah,
too,
we
but-
talked about it a little bit earlier. What the police department is trying to do is be more proactive. And so if there is a child, especially if they're engaged in some activity that may be harmful, they're going to try to reach the parents. So they're not going to get a fine unless they're doing something illegal, right? But they're trying to reconnect them with their family so that they can get home and be safe. Most of the things that we've encountered so far have been larger groups of young people who have been out, and unfortunately, some tragedy has occurred during those times. So really just trying to make sure that our young people can be safe.
Okay. And another question from Linda. Linda says, "I haven't been able to make the master plan meetings due to my work schedule. Is there somewhere I can send my feedback?"
Absolutely, they can send their feedback to the City of Grand Rapids on their website. There's an area where you can send some feedback if you have any questions, thoughts, concerns, and even connecting with your neighborhood association. If you know how to, or what association you live in, or what neighborhood you live in, you can share some of that information, or you can contact one of your commissioners from your specific ward and share that information with them, and we'll make sure that that gets out.
Is there a deadline for the feedback? I know it's kind of reached a new stage of feedback for the CMP, but is there a deadline where they're just saying no more?
We haven't gotten to that spot yet, so
Okay.
there's plenty of time for people to be able to send in their feedback, but that we will announce when it gets to that point that we're completely finished. But I think there's still some things going on in the neighborhood associations, and they're still trying to get more people engaged in the process. So we got a little ways to go, but not too much longer.
Great, and we have another Commissioner Night Out coming up next month, so that's
Yes.
probably another great opportunity.
It'll be a good opportunity. It's in the evening. We make sure to feed people, but again, if it's during the hours when you're working, contact one of your commissioners or send the message through the City of Grand Rapids. They have a link on the website to get that information for you, because we want to make sure that we're hearing as many voices as possible, and we are really dedicated and intentional about making sure that we share that information. So I know people have contacted me and my other peers to make sure that we're sharing that information out.
Another question, this one is about the NCS survey that we've been talking about. It says, the survey said our economy was improving, but how equitable is that improvement?
Again, to that statement that I made earlier, this was a national survey, and so a lot of the data that they collected compared the data that came out compared us against cities across the nation that are very similar to size with our city. And so you have a group of people, right, that are surveyed. They sent out surveys in a number of ways, and then they actually picked a bunch of people to do these surveys. But when people get those surveys, I get stuff that comes in the mail all the time, and I don't have time to fill it out, right? And so how are we polling people? Who are we reaching? Who are the people that are sending that information back? Are there different ways that we can utilize to reach the broader community? But it's really trying to get people engaged in that and then take that information. So they had a small data pool. You had a number of people that responded back into that data pool. They took that information and then compared it with the national data. And so now we're trying to get more information from that as to who those people were and if we can get that disaggregated across which wards and income and cultural demographics and all of those things. So
Great. And we have one last question we'll answer really quickly. I think we've talked about
said
this
that
a
one
little
earlier,
bit too.
but
So yeah.
go ahead.
Where is the next city night out, the commissioner night out? This question's from John. John said, I really enjoy the meetings in neighborhood spaces. And I do have it here. So if you don't have all the details, I can,
Go for it.
I can
I
fill
mean,
in for you.
You did it so well.
Well, I did. I
Is it
wrote it
Gerald R.
down.
Ford?
Yeah, it is. And am I finding it in my notes at this very moment? Yes. July 30, Commissioner Night Out at Gerald R. Ford Academic Center.
Yes.
So July 30. That's where you'll have the next
And
opportunity.
I believe we start around 5 o'clock, and then they serve dinner. There's an opportunity to engage with different city departments. If you have questions about things that go on throughout our city, just like we had for our Office of Sustainability, those people will be there to talk with you and share information. You can get a lot of questions answered during that time. And your commissioners will also be there, so you have an opportunity to engage with each and every one of us and find out what's going on in the specific wards. And if you have questions and concerns, you can talk to us in that space, and then we have our regular meeting.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. Thanks for being on our show today.
Absolutely.
Always a joy when we get to have you on City Connection. So
Thank you. I love it.
That is all the time we have today. So thank you to our guests for coming in, and thank you to all of you at home for tuning in and sending in your questions. Don't forget, you can always watch rebroadcasts throughout May or throughout June on Cable GRTV's Channel 25 or the GRTV YouTube page. See you next month, Grand Rapids. Perfect.